Um, Yesterday, I talked about the vision for ARC. The vision is sustained development for Africa through informed policy making. And it's no accident that we have witnessed high growth syndrome in Africa. And I'm convinced that one of the key factors of production is informed policy making. And ARC has been at the center of that for the last 25 years. So we have just celebrated our 25th year anniversary. And we did actually three things at the event, very successful event in Nairobi. We had an opportunity to showcase collaborative research projects that have actually been undertaken in the network, which have had influence on policy. We also had a policy roundtable focused on growth and poverty reduction in Africa. And then we end up with alumni roundtable, where we have given them just one assignment, that is the future of ARC, sustainability and viability. As it turned out, as I mentioned yesterday, the organization has become pretty complex. It has a research arm, it has training arm, it has policy outreach. And one of the things that I noticed after I took over immediately is lack of communication gap. Those in research knowing not much in the training, and training not knowing much in research, and so on. So we took that opportunity to actually create an alumni organization. As you know, we have a menu of powerful alumni all over Africa. And we have connections between Ghana, Nigeria, CSA, Oxford University, Kenya, who have actually created a steering group, and they actually own it. We are facilitating it, and I'm pretty convinced that we'll have a powerful and unified voice for African development. I didn't quite appreciate the significance for alumni organization when I was in Nigeria doing a keynote for Nigerian Economic Society, and then I mentioned, how many of you are ARC alums? Quite a few showed hands, and I said, let's meet at 6 p.m. And they showed up. There were 40, and there were guys in the CPP, Collaborative PhD program. There are those in CMAP. There are those in research, and they didn't quite know each other. And then one of them actually raised his hand and said, look, today President Jonathan Goodluck raised the equation. Do you know who wrote that speech? He says CPP alumnus, the ARC, the chief of staff in Nigeria. So I said, okay, you guys, you are going to make history today. So why don't we start thinking about getting these guys together? And so it started in Nigeria, spilled over in Kenya, Ghana, and now this thing is under formation. So before I talk about strategies, let me remind you of what I said yesterday. So this organization came into existence 25 years ago. The initiative basically of non-Africans, the Canada, the US, and a lot of people even do not know that it's actually incorporated in Delaware. This is a Delaware organization, but domiciled and operated in Kenya, Kenya being a host country for the ARC. And then as a result of that, we have a pretty complex governance system. So I report to the board of 20 individuals, half of whom are institutional directors. So the World Bank has a seat, UK has a seat, and then Nordic countries have each seat, and then you have Gates Fund and so on. So you can see that of all these names that I mentioned, there's no Africa, right? So now it has begun changing. So one of our biggest strategies is to enhance African stakeholdership of the ARC, because it has done so much for this region. And Kenya, the government of Kenya, made actually history. 3 months ago, they were voted in as the first African institutional director on the ARC board. So the rest of the board, apart from institutional directors, are there on their own volition. So governors of central bank like Beno Ndulu, the vice president of the African Development Bank, and others, they are there on their own volition. So as I mentioned earlier, the motivation behind the formation of this organization was that 25 years ago, a lot of economic policy decisions were being made on kind of ideology, heuristics, with kind of no lack of rigor and evidence. So the idea is, how do you bring rigor and evidence? So that is how it started, and it has actually innovated very, very interesting mechanisms, one of which is known as thematic. It's the oldest track where you have researchers drawn from around the continent, universities, central banks, present research in various stages of development, and they get reviewed by each other, peer review. And then resource people who are actually around there monitoring that review process, and that's how I got involved. And I think that's how Leon's got involved. So, and then what we've done is actually utilize this network of researchers, resource people, to actually work on big issues. Collaborative research program actually came out of that, issues like food security, climate change, and so on. And then they took the collaborative model into the training. You have collaborative training programs, collaboration of a select number of universities actually collaborate in joint curriculum development, joint enforcement of standards, and joint offerings of electives. And then we have this policy outreach, senior policy seminars, national workshops, and so on. So we have a number of indicators of success. I don't have time to go over that, both in terms of long-term consequences of what this organization has achieved, because we have been in existence for 25 years, and we see the results over here. The story that I keep on telling is that once I showed up in the Central Bank of Kenya looking for data on equity bank, I go to the research department of the Central Bank. I see everyone is ARC alumni, including the governor of the Central Bank of Kenya. And then you have some 8, 9 governors who have actually gone and nurtured through this. We call them like alums of the. And then, as I mentioned, collaborative research program having interface with policy decisions, poverty reduction strategies. The latest, we have service delivery indicators, partnership with the World Bank, where these indicators are actually inaugurated in Kenya. I think next one is Nigeria, and so on. So what I'm really saying is that this organization has really been a true African success story. But it still continues to face gaps. And by bridging those gaps, we are ready to move this to the next level of excellence. So the strategies that I've been talking about are actually intended to be in that framework. So we have ARC actually goes through a number of evaluations. 2 evaluations were commissioned. One has to do with this oldest program that the ARC has for thematic research. And we have the Dominique from the World Bank and Steve from Sparkle College actually evaluated. By the way, Steve now has become a chief economist of USAID. USAID sponsored the African Economic Research Board meeting 2 weeks ago. Steve, by the way, was not able to speak because he had to recuse himself from everything that we did in Washington. And then we have the current strategy of ARC, evaluated by Governor Caleb, who is actually in our midst here, and then Professor John Loxley of Canada. And we have draft reports already in. So what is coming out of this is a menu of recommendations. For instance, on the thematic research, there is a very strong suggestion for actually for reconfiguration of the 5 themes. Right now we have poverty and income distribution, microeconomic policies, trade and regional integration, and so on. So there is now a strong sentiment that we should have a focused theme on agriculture, climate change, and natural resource management. And then we're also going to weed out one of the programs called E, which is kind of hodgepodge. And so so that's one. And the other is we're looking at the term limits for resource people. Mostly really chairs. There will be term limits. And then we're also going to look at the timeline. So in the thematic research, you start with new proposal presentation, you go to work in progress, and then eventually final report, a 1.5-year cycle. So there is now a recommendation that for some really, really strong work in progress papers to be fast-tracked into final report. And in fact, management, the ARC management actually goes even further to recommend that maybe even the new proposals, which are very, very strong, could actually go to the ultimate stage as well. And then of course, a variety of mechanisms for linkages globally, north-south, south-south, so that what we do conforms to global best practices. So the whole notion of what I call Africanization, globalization, they are very consistent. We have deep African perspective, but we have to do it in conformity to global best practices. And then we have a menu of recommendations for evaluations coming from the strategic plan. So what I'm going to present today, since we don't have much time, is the cost-cutting strategies, 6 or 7, which are actually emerging. But underneath, we have a menu of recommendations. We could have 50 of them. So we'll have a document that will actually be done to be presented in July 2014 committee meeting of the ARC board. So that's what I'm going to do. So let's see. So the key messages, that are coming out of these 2 evaluations. That's another technology. Is this power outage? Looks like everyone is able to see this, is that right? So I'll proceed. So there are many specific observations contained in this draft report, and I will not go over them. I'm going to kind of summarize this into these emerging themes. So evaluations have generally reaffirmed the validity and necessity of the ARC model. There is growing demand for evidence-based policy making in Africa. There is high demand for quality economic researchers and policy analysts in Africa. But capacity for policy analysis and research is still inadequate in the continent. And so there's still strong demand for quality educators. So in the training arena, so one of the things that we do is not just capacity building in the sense of individuals, but also institutional capacity. Strengthening economics departments, for instance, to actually conform to global best practices. So when you say however, that's where the gaps are. The question is, how are you going to beat those gaps to get this really strong and successful institution to be even stronger? Now, these are the themes that are emerging. Let me point out that the one point that I mentioned earlier, which is a need to have integration of a variety of programs in the ARC, cuts across all of them. And so the organization has become pretty complex. Some people think of it as like a think tank. I had an interesting conversation when I took this, when my appointment announced. So Jim Poterba, who is the president of National Bureau of Economic Research, wanted to know something about ARC. He went to the website, and then I had a meeting with him in Boston, and he said, what is this? Is this a think tank? And I said, it is not, but it is a think tank. So it's just like NBR. Yeah, but it's not just NBR, but it's NBR. So how about Brookings? Yeah, it's Brookings, but it's not just Brookings. And then how about NSF? Yeah, so it's really, ARC has become kind of an amalgam of NBR, NSF, Brookings. And not only that, it's also in the research and training arm. And then we get ranked sometimes amongst think tanks, which is very, by the way, although we do very, very well. we had a global, we are positioned very well in global think tank ranks, but it's very limited portion of ARC.